The banker looked at my driver's license, then at the computer screen, then back at me with a face so carefully blank it frightened me more than panic would have. "Mrs. Whitaker," she said quietly, "why are you closing this account?" I gave the little laugh people give when they don't understand the seriousness of a room. "My father passed away 6 months ago," I said. "There's only $41 in it. I just want to finish the paperwork." She did not smile. Instead, she turned the monitor slightly away from the lobby and lowered her voice. "This is not a $41 account." I remember the smell of the bank that morning, lemon cleaner and old carpet, the soft clicking of keyboards, the little ceramic bowl of peppermints on her desk. I remember my hand resting on the folder of Dad's death certificate, my thumb tracing the raised seal like it was a lesson plan I had reviewed too many times. Then the banker said, "There appears to be approximately $18 million connected to this customer profile." For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. $18 million does not belong in the same sentence as my father, a retired bus mechanic who saved coffee cans full of screws and rinsed out plastic sandwich bags to use again. It did not belong with me, a 52-year-old high school history teacher from Dayton, Ohio, who still clipped coupons and drove a 12-year-old Subaru with a heater that worked only when it felt like being generous. I said the only honest thing I could say. "That isn't possible." The banker folded her hands. "That is exactly why I need to ask you a few questions." And that was when I understood that my father had not simply left behind an old bank account. He had left behind a secret. Good day, dear listeners. It's Mia again. I'm glad you're here with me. Please subscribe to my channel and like this video. And also let me know in the comments which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. My name is Margaret Whitaker, though almost everyone calls me Maggie. At the time this happened, I had been teaching American history for 27 years. I taught juniors and seniors, mostly kids who thought the past was something dusty adults kept in books because they had run out of interesting things to say. My job was to prove to them that the past was never past. It was evidence. It was motive. It was the missing paragraph in a family story. It was the reason a country made one choice instead of another, or the reason one person learned to stay quiet when speaking might have saved them. I lived alone in a small brick house on Maple Ridge Avenue, with a narrow porch, a stubborn hydrangea bush, and a kitchen table covered most evenings with essays, tea mugs, and stacks of documents I meant to file but never did. My husband, Daniel, had died 9 years earlier from a heart attack while changing a tire in our driveway. One minute he was complaining about the lug nuts, the next minute he was gone. Grief had made me quiet, but not empty. Teaching kept me moving. My students kept me honest. You cannot stand in front of teenagers every day and pretend life has not marked you. They see everything. They notice when your voice catches on a sentence about loss. They notice when you wear the same cardigan 3 Mondays in a row. They notice when you are tired. So I learned to tell the truth carefully. I told them history was not about memorizing dates. It was about asking who benefited from the official version. I did not know then how badly I would need that lesson myself. My father, Harold Bennett, had lived in a peeling white house outside Springfield. He was 81 when he died. He had bad knees, a practical mind, and the emotional vocabulary of a locked toolbox. He loved me, but he showed it by changing my oil, sharpening my garden shears, and handing me envelopes of cash for my classroom supplies, even when I told him I did not need it. After he died, I found very little. 2 flannel shirts hanging behind the bedroom door, a shoebox of old photographs, a kitchen drawer full of twist ties, a will so simple it was almost lonely. Everything to his only daughter, Margaret Elaine Whitaker. There was no mansion, no antique collection, no hidden safe in the floor, just a house worth maybe $140,000, an old truck that needed a transmission, and a checking account with $41.16. At least, that was what I thought. My father had one younger brother, my Uncle Raymond. Raymond Bennett was polished in a way my father never was. He wore tailored coats, donated to the hospital foundation, served on boards, and spoke in that gentle professional tone people use when they are accustomed to being obeyed without raising their voice. He came to the funeral in a charcoal suit and touched my shoulder like a man blessing a subordinate. "Your father was never good with paperwork," he said. Let me know if you need help cleaning up loose ends." At the time, I was grateful. That is one of the painful parts of betrayal. It often begins as relief. In the months after Dad's funeral, Raymond called me more than he had in the previous decade. He asked about the estate. He asked whether I had found any old papers. He asked whether Dad had mentioned business matters. Always lightly, always with concern. "Your father could be secretive," he said once. "Not in a bad way, just private." I remember standing in the school hallway after 7th period, holding my phone while students rushed past with backpacks and laughter. "What kind of business matters?" I asked. Raymond chuckled softly. "Oh, nothing serious. He had old habits, old accounts. Sometimes men of his generation tuck things away and forgot them." That sentence stayed with me. Old accounts. At the time, I thought he meant unpaid bills or forgotten insurance policies. Ordinary things. The homework of death. Then the mail started disappearing. At first, I blamed myself. Grief makes you misplace things. I would see a letter from a bank or a county office, set it on the sideboard, and later it would be gone. Once I found my back gate open when I knew I had latched it. Another time, my father's old metal file box, the one I had brought home from his closet, sat a few inches away from where I had left it. Nothing dramatic, nothing I could prove, but teachers are trained to notice patterns. One student forgets homework, that is an event. The same student forgets homework every Friday before a custody exchange, that is a pattern. I began keeping notes. Not because I thought I was in danger, not yet. I simply wrote things down because documentation is a kind of flashlight. March 3rd. Mail from First Union Trust seen at 4:10 p.m. Missing by 8 p.m. March 7th. Back gate open. March 12th. Raymond called, asking about old safe deposit keys. That last one chilled me. I had not told anyone about the key. I had found it taped to the underside of Dad's dresser drawer, wrapped in yellowed masking tape, with 3 words written in his blocky handwriting. Not Ray, bank. My father had never called his brother Ray. He called him Raymond, always. That made the note feel deliberate, like a warning written by a man who did not trust paper, but trusted his daughter to understand caution. I took the key to the bank on a grey Thursday morning during spring break. I expected a box of old coins, maybe my mother's wedding ring, maybe papers from a life insurance policy. Instead, the manager told me the key did not match any active safe deposit box at that branch. "But your father does have an old account here," she said. "Very small balance. $41.16. I almost laughed from disappointment. I made an appointment to close it the following week. That was how I ended up sitting across from a young banker named Olivia Marquez, while sunlight came through the blinds in thin prison bar stripes across her desk. After she told me about the $18 million, my first feeling was not excitement. It was suspicion. Money that large does not appear without roots. It grows from something, or it is placed there to make someone else responsible for it. I asked Olivia to explain. She glanced toward the glass wall of the office. "There are linked custodial assets, dormant investment accounts, and what appears to be a trust relationship under your father's profile, but some access permissions are unusual." "What does unusual mean?" She hesitated. "It means I need our legal department to review this before I disclose anything further." I felt heat rising in my face. "My father is dead. I'm his executor and only heir." "I understand, but there are flags on the profile." "What kind of flags?" Her voice dropped lower. "Disputes, prior authorization changes, a power of attorney." I sat very still. My father never told me he gave anyone power of attorney. Olivia's eyes softened then, not with pity exactly, but with warning. "Mrs. Whitaker, before you speak to any family member about this, I would strongly suggest you consult an attorney." It was the kind of sentence people say when they are not allowed to say what they know. I walked out of that bank with the folder pressed to my chest. Outside, the day looked ordinary, in a way that felt almost insulting. Cars moved through traffic. A man in a red jacket argued with a parking meter. Somewhere nearby, someone was cutting grass. I sat in my Subaru for a long time with the doors locked. $18 million. Power of attorney. Not Ray. Bank. I thought of my father's hands, thick and cracked, lifting a coffee mug. I thought of Uncle Raymond at the funeral, calm and polished. I thought of the missing mail, the open gate, the questions about paperwork. Fear is strange. It does not always make you small. Sometimes it makes you precise. I drove home, put the bank folder in a plastic freezer bag, and hid it inside an old box of classroom maps in my hall closet. Then I took photographs of every document I had. The will, the death certificate, Dad's handwritten note, the old key, the mail I still had. I uploaded everything to a cloud folder and sent copies to an email address Daniel and I had once used for household bills. Then I made a list on a yellow legal pad. Do not call Raymond. Find attorney. Secure mail. Inventory Dad's papers. Ask bank for written confirmation. Change locks. That night, I slept on the couch with the porch light on and my phone under my hand. The next morning, Raymond called at 7:12. I let it ring. At school, I used my planning period to search for probate attorneys. I did not want someone flashy. I wanted someone careful, the way you want a surgeon to be careful. I found a woman named Denise Calder, whose website was plain and whose reviews said things like, thorough, direct, and does not tolerate nonsense. That sounded perfect. Her office was above a pharmacy in a red brick building downtown. She was in her 60s, with silver hair cut at her chin and reading glasses on a chain. Her conference table had no flowers, no glossy brochures, just legal pads, labeled folders, and a bowl of wrapped butterscotch candies. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she held out her hand. May I see the note? I gave it to her, in its plastic sleeve. She read the 3 words. Not Ray. Bank. Then she looked at me. Your father was afraid of your uncle. Hearing it said plainly made my stomach tighten. I don't know that. No, she said. But we are going to behave as if it might be true until evidence proves otherwise. That was the beginning of my education. Denise explained that wealthy people are not the only ones who need estate protection. Sometimes ordinary families become tangled in old settlements, land rights, business shares, forgotten mineral interests, or trust assets established generations earlier. Sometimes one person knows more than everyone else. Sometimes that person uses politeness as a curtain. Do not accuse anyone, she said. Do not threaten anyone. Do not sign anything. Do not have private conversations with your uncle. If he calls, let it go to voicemail. I nodded. I'm a teacher, I said. I can follow instructions. For the first time, she smiled. Good. Then we will treat this like a research project. Sources first, conclusions later. Denise filed formal requests with the bank, the probate court, and the county recorder. She also referred me to a forensic accountant named Malcolm Price, a quiet man with rimless glasses who looked at financial records the way my best students looked at primary documents. Within 2 weeks, the first proof arrived. My father had not been poor. He had been hidden. The $18 million came from a trust established by my maternal grandfather, Arthur Keene, a man I barely remembered. He had owned farmland outside Columbus that became valuable when a logistics company bought surrounding acreage in the 1980s. The trust had been created for my mother, then for me if she died. My mother had died when I was 11. I had been told there was no inheritance because the land sale had failed. That was a lie. The trust had grown quietly through investments for 40 years. My father was supposed to act as guardian of my interest until I turned 25, but when I was 19, records showed a petition had been filed, claiming I was estranged from my father, financially irresponsible, and mentally unstable after my mother's death. Mentally unstable. At 19, I had been a sophomore at Ohio State, studying education, working weekends at a bookstore, and sending my father postcards because long phone calls made him uncomfortable. Who filed the petition? I asked. Denise slid the paper toward me. The signature was elegant and familiar. Raymond Bennett. My uncle had told a court I was unstable. He had positioned himself as a family protector. He had obtained influence over the trust. Later, through a series of amendments and power of attorney documents, he had diverted control away from my father. But why didn't Dad stop him? I asked. Malcolm answered gently. Maybe he tried. That was when Denise opened another folder. There were objections filed by your father in 2001 and 2003. Both were withdrawn. Withdrawn by Dad? Denise's expression did not change. Withdrawn by counsel representing Harold Bennett. I never knew he had a lawyer. You may want to prepare yourself, she said. This is going to get uglier. The next layer came from county property records. My father's house had once been used as collateral for a private loan connected to Raymond's real estate company. Dad had signed it, supposedly, but the signature looked wrong. My father printed his name like a man assembling a machine. The signature on the loan flowed like calligraphy. I knew, before Malcolm said it, that it was not Dad's hand. Then came the bank records. For years, small amounts had been transferred from trust dividends into accounts linked to shell companies. Not huge withdrawals at first, 10,000 here, 25,000 there, enough to disappear inside legal fees and management expenses. Later, after Dad's health declined, the amounts grew. 300,000, 700,000, 1.2 million. Each transfer carried some clean professional label. Administrative restructuring, asset protection review, consulting fee. I had taught enough history to know that terrible things often arrive wearing respectable names. Raymond called again the day after Denise sent a preservation letter to his attorney. This time, he left a voicemail. Maggie, sweetheart, I'm concerned. I hear you've been talking to people who don't understand our family. Your father was confused near the end. I tried to protect him from stress. I hope you won't let outsiders turn grief into suspicion. His voice was gentle. That made it worse. A shouting man reveals himself. A gentle man asks you to doubt yourself. I forwarded the voicemail to Denise. She replied with one sentence. He is worried. The pressure increased after that. A cousin I had not seen in years sent a message saying Raymond had always carried the family burdens. A former colleague of my uncle's called my school office and left a message asking me to resolve a private financial misunderstanding discreetly. Someone parked outside my house twice in 1 week. Not long, just long enough for me to notice. Denise told me to install cameras. So I did. I felt foolish at first, standing on a ladder with a screwdriver, while Mrs. Alvarez from next door watered her begonias and watched me over the hedge. Everything all right, honey? She called. I looked down at the little black camera in my hand. I hope so. That evening, I found an envelope tucked into my mailbox with no stamp. Inside was a photocopy of a psychiatric intake form from when I was 13, after my mother died. I had gone to counselling for 3 months because I cried at school and stopped eating lunch. Across the top, someone had written in blue ink, "Courts remember patterns." I stood in my entryway holding that paper while the house seemed to go silent around me. That was the first time I felt real fear. Not fear of losing money. I had lived most of my life without money and could continue doing so. I was afraid of being rewritten. There are few violations more intimate than someone taking your grief and using it as evidence against your character. The next morning, I brought the envelope to Denise. She read it, then placed it in an evidence sleeve. "This is intimidation," she said. "I know. Are you ready to continue?" I thought of my students, especially the quiet ones, who waited to see whether adults meant what they said about truth. "Yes," I told her. "But I want to do it correctly." Denise nodded. "Then we file." The civil complaint was quiet on paper and explosive in meaning. Fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, undue influence. Conversion of trust assets, forgery, financial exploitation of an elderly person. Denise also referred certain documents to state investigators. She did not promise criminal charges. Good lawyers do not promise fireworks. They build roads and let evidence travel. Raymond's attorneys responded with polished contempt. They claimed my father had willingly allowed Raymond to manage complicated assets. They claimed I had known about the trust and chosen not to participate. They claimed any transfers were legitimate fees. They suggested, without saying directly, that I was emotionally fragile and motivated by sudden greed. Greed. I laughed when Denise read that part aloud, but not because it was funny. I was wearing a cardigan with chalk dust on the sleeve and eating peanut butter crackers from my purse because I had come straight from school. Apparently, I said, I hid my greed very well for 52 years. Denise did not smile. They are testing what accusation hurts you most. That became another lesson. When people cannot defeat your facts, they go looking for your shame. The confrontation happened on a Sunday evening in April. I had just finished grading essays about the Reconstruction amendments when my doorbell rang. On the porch stood Uncle Raymond in a navy overcoat, holding his hat in both hands like a man arriving with condolences. My cameras recorded everything. I opened the door, but left the chain on. "Hello, Raymond." His eyes flicked to the chain, then he smiled sadly. "Maggie, is that necessary?" "Yes," he sighed. I had hoped we could speak as family. My attorney asked that all communication go through her. Attorneys make money from conflict. Sometimes they prevent it from being buried. For a moment, the kindness left his face. Not all at once, just enough for me to see the machinery underneath. "You have no idea what your father did," he said softly. I said nothing. He was weak. He signed things and forgot them. He begged me to keep you away from the burden of it all. "My father left me a note." Raymond's mouth tightened. "Your father left many confused notes. Not this one." We stood there with the porch light between us, moths tapping themselves against the glass. Then he leaned closer. "Maggie, listen to me. You are a school teacher. You have a good reputation. Do you really want your students, your principal, your neighbors reading court filings about your mental health history, about family money, about your father's incompetence?" There it was. Not a threat in volume, a threat in velvet. I felt my heart beating hard, but my voice stayed level. "You should leave. I am offering you dignity." "No," I said. "You are asking me to trade truth for silence." His eyes went cold. "You always did think classrooms made you righteous." I looked at him through the narrow opening. "And you always thought politeness made you clean." He stared at me for one long second. Then he put on his hat, stepped back, and smiled toward the camera above my door. "Good evening, Margaret." That was the first mistake he made, where I could see it clearly. The second came during deposition. By then, Denise had obtained years of bank communications through discovery, emails, signature cards, internal memos, legal invoices, calendar entries, documents Raymond's attorneys had fought to keep hidden and failed. The deposition took place in a glass conference room on the 23rd floor of an office building in Columbus. Raymond sat at the far end of the table with two attorneys beside him, composed and elegant. He looked less like a defendant than a man chairing a charitable foundation luncheon. I sat beside Denise with a legal pad in front of me. I wrote only one sentence at the top: "Stay calm." Raymond testified that my father had asked him to manage the trust because I was unavailable and uninterested. Denise placed an exhibit in front of him. It was a birthday card I had mailed my father the same year Raymond claimed we were estranged. Inside, I had written about student teaching, Daniel's terrible attempt at baking a cake, and how I hoped Dad would visit soon. "Do you recognize this card?" Denise asked. "No. It was found in Harold Bennett's bedside table." Raymond adjusted his cuff. "My brother kept many things. He kept every card his daughter sent him." Raymond said nothing. Then Denise moved to the psychiatric form. "Did you arrange for this document to be delivered to my client's home?" "No. Did anyone acting on your behalf do so?" "Not to my knowledge." She placed another exhibit down. A still image from my porch camera. A man in a grey coat at my mailbox. Then another exhibit. A payment from Raymond's business account to a private investigator. Then another. The investigator's invoice. Document delivery. Maple Ridge address. Raymond's attorney objected. Denise let him. Objections in depositions are sometimes like coughs in a quiet room. They do not remove what everyone heard. Raymond's face remained calm, but a small red patch appeared above his collar. The collapse did not happen dramatically. It happened the way old plaster gives way after years of hidden water damage. First a crack, then another, then the wall is no longer a wall. The forged loan signature was matched by a handwriting expert to samples from Raymond's former assistant. The assistant, now retired and living in Florida, gave a sworn statement that Raymond had asked her to prepare family documents and sign Harold Bennett's name when Harold was too overwhelmed to handle administrative matters. A bank compliance officer testified that concerns had been raised years earlier about unusual transfers, but Raymond had provided legal letters claiming full family authorization. Then came the email. Every case has a document that changes the temperature of the room. This one was from Raymond to his attorney, 12 years earlier. Subject line, Harold issue. The body was brief. If Maggie ever learns the Keen trust remained active, Harold will become a problem. We need his authority neutralized before he talks. I read that sentence 3 times. Before he talks. My father had known. Maybe not everything, but enough. He had tried to tell me in the only way fear allowed. Not Ray. Bank. At the probate hearing, the judge was an older man, with a tired face and sharp eyes. He had the manner of someone who had watched families destroy themselves over furniture, farmland, jewelry, and pride. But even he seemed troubled by the record. Raymond's attorneys argued complexity. They said trust management was difficult. They said families misunderstand money. They said memories fade. Denise stood with one hand resting on the table. Your Honor, she said, this case is not complicated because the documents are unclear. It is complicated because the defendant spent decades making sure the rightful beneficiary never saw them. She did not shout. She did not need to. The evidence did the speaking. The court removed Raymond and all affiliated managers from the trust. A neutral fiduciary was appointed. The disputed transfers were frozen. The forged collateral documents were voided. Civil damages were ordered into further accounting. Criminal referrals moved forward separately, and several months later, Raymond was indicted on charges related to financial exploitation, forgery, and fraud. He did not go to prison immediately. Wealthy men rarely fall in one clean motion. There were hearings, motions, delays, medical excuses, negotiations, but his name left the hospital board. His company lost lenders. People stopped returning his calls. For a man like Raymond, reputation had been armor. The truth made it transparent. I recovered less than the number Olivia had first seen on the bank screen, at least at first. Legal fees, taxes, disputed assets, and clawback proceedings took time. But enough was protected that I never had to worry about losing my home again. Enough was recovered that I could fund scholarships in my mother's name and quietly pay off school lunch debts at the high school without anyone knowing it was me. I did not buy a mansion. I bought my father's house from the estate, repaired the porch, replaced the roof, and turned his old garage into a small reading room with shelves along one wall. I planted lavender by the back steps because my mother had loved it. In the spring, I stood there with dirt under my fingernails and cried harder than I had cried in court. Not because of the money, because the house no longer felt like a crime scene. It felt like a place where truth had finally been allowed to breathe. I kept teaching for 3 more years. I told my students, as I always had, that primary sources matter, that signatures matter, that power does not always announce itself with cruelty. Sometimes it smiles, donates, compliments your composure, and asks you to be reasonable while it steals your life one document at a time. When I retired, my students gave me a framed map of the United States with small pins marking where they had gone after graduation. On the back, one of them had written, "Thank you for teaching us to ask who benefits from the story." I keep that frame in my reading room now. Some mornings, I sit by the window with coffee in my father's chipped blue mug. I watch the light move across the floor and think about how close I came to closing an account for $41 and walking away from the truth. That is what still haunts me, not the 18 million, the $41, the small number that almost convinced me there was nothing worth seeing. But life is often like that. The truth does not always arrive carrying a trumpet. Sometimes it waits inside a cheap folder, behind a tired banker's careful eyes, beneath a note taped to an old drawer. I was not brave. I was careful. I did not defeat Raymond with anger. I defeated him with copies, dates, signatures, patience, and the simple refusal to let a polite lie become the family history. The money gave me comfort, yes, it gave me safety, it gave me choices. But the real inheritance was something else. My father left me a warning. My mother's family left me a legacy. And I left myself a life where no one else gets to decide whether my grief makes me weak. The truth has a weight of its own. Once you pick it up, you may carry it for a long time. But if you carry it steadily enough, it can become the thing that sets you down gently on the other side. So tell me, what would you have done if you went to close a forgotten account for $41 and discovered your family had hidden millions from you for decades? Would you confront them immediately, or would you stay quiet and gather evidence first? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story reminded you to check the fine print, protect your documents, or trust that uneasy feeling in your chest, then maybe it found you for a reason.